What's a great show on Netflix to binge?
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Yesterday we went through players in the Eastern Conference, one person per team, who finds themselves in a worse situation this season than what they were in last season. So of course today we're looking at the Western Conference and looking at those players again who are in a worse spot than what they were last year. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. Quick note though before that, yes, for people asking, I will be doing a similar show for players who are in a better position, East and West Conference. We'll do that probably next week. Tomorrow I'll do a show breaking down the NBA schedule, which was just released about an hour ago, so talking about all the fantasy impact there. It's very much not as large as in the past, especially for default playoffs, which again, you shouldn't be playing default playoffs. They go way too late into the season. You should be finishing second last week of March, I reckon probably is the best time to finish, but we'll talk about all that in tomorrow's show when we look at the NBA schedule. But now let's talk about these players who find themselves in worse situations this season than what they were last year. We'll start off with the Dallas Mavericks. And the guy I'm looking at here is Tim Hardaway Jr. Now, Hardaway, as a member of the Knicks last season, played quite a few minutes and was one of their number one offensive options. He went to Dallas and the numbers did decrease, but overall for the season, he played 32 minutes a night and scored 18 points. There is almost zero chance that he's going to be anywhere near that level this season. I don't think he's going to be starting. I think the Mavericks are going to be running Delon Wright and Luka Doncic as their starting backcourt, with probably Justin Jackson or Dorian Finney-Smith at the three. And Hardaway's value in the NBA is rapidly declining. He shot just 39% from the field last season, a true shooting of under 53% as well. On a team like Dallas, with Brunson, with Barea, with Wright, with Doncic, any of that playmaking that Hardaway has shown over the past 3 or 4 seasons is not going to be utilised, and I just don't think he's going to get anywhere near, not even only the 32 minutes a game that he played last season, but even 25, 26, I think is going to be a significant stretch for Hardaway. So he, to me, falls well out of the calculations for standard fantasy leagues, and if he was out of the rotation at any point, if they went with Barea and Brunson as their backup guards, or even Seth Curry's there, who I think is a better player than Hardaway, I think there's a legitimate chance that Hardaway is not even an every night rotation player for this Dallas Mavericks team. Could be a player who takes one of the largest hits out of everybody compared this season to last season. Not a great spot if you have Timmy Hardaway in any sort of dynasty format, and he's not going to be a standard league draftable player for this upcoming season. I think we can all agree on that. Let's look now at the Denver Nuggets and which player is in a worse situation. There are a few options here. I think that someone like Malik Beasley is probably in a worse situation this year with a fully healthy Farton, Will Barton, and Gaz Harris. And that was one of the big reasons that Beasley got as many minutes as he did last season. But I am going with Jeremy Grant instead, traded across from the Oklahoma City Thunder, where he played a ton of minutes last year as their starting power forward. 33 minutes a game, averaged 13.5 and 5, and ended the season as the 99th ranked fantasy player. He shot an impressive 39% from three. Maybe that continues, but prior to last season, he'd been a poor three-point shooter. And now he comes across into a front court that has Paul Millsap in that starting power forward position. Now, I'm pretty confident that Millsap's minutes are going to drop, so he could have been the option I put here for the Nuggets as well, because his situation is worse also. But I don't think that we're going to see 33 minutes of Jeremy Grant and 20 minutes of Paul Millsap. I think it's more likely to be a 25-28 type scenario. They play together at some point. Mason Plumlee also going to take a hit in this situation, as there'll be fewer lineups for Plumlee and Jokic to play together. So I think that Grant, despite having this career year last year as 33 minutes a night, he barely cracked the top 100. I think that's going to put him really at the perils of being a standard league guy. I'm not sure he's going to be there. I don't see 33 minutes a night for Jeremy Grant heading into this coming season just because of the way the Nuggets are structured. That's not even talking about guys like Juancho Hernangomez, who's capable at playing the four, Michael Porter Jr., who might be in the rotation as well, Plumlee, Jokic, Millsap. So many options there for a guy that when he had that free runner at power forward last year, still put up good numbers, but it was only barely a top 100 situation, and getting ahead of that for Jeremy Grant for this upcoming season is probably going to be a little bit more difficult. Now, I don't know anything about fantasy football, and that's why I listen to Vinny Iyer at Locked On Fantasy Football. So when I go to create a team and when I go to draft a team, I get the best information out there. Vinny gives you the edge with 20 years covering fantasy football. If you listen to the same stuff as everyone else, then you end up with the same bad team. Make sure you get that edge from Vinny that will put you ahead on draft day and put you ahead all season long. Locked On Fantasy Football on your favorite podcast provider. All right, let's go to the next team we're going to look at here. It is the Golden State Warriors, and which players are in worse spots. And I think Willie Cauley-Stein is going to be that guy. Now, I think that it is likely that Cauley-Stein is the starting center for the Golden State Warriors, but he has had that starting center mantle in Sacramento for the last couple of seasons, and he has failed to thrive. 27 minutes a game last year, and still just the 118th ranked player because he doesn't block any shots at all, 0.6 blocks there. He averaged 12 and 8 and shot 55% from the free throw line, and that's in the 27 minutes. Kevon Looney's a better player than Willie Cauley-Stein. Steve Kerr has talked up Kevon Looney, and I think Looney will come off the bench, but also play more minutes than Cauley-Stein. So while he might be a starter, and starter terms can be often overvalued by people, is he a 23 or 24 minute a night type of guy? I think that's more realistic for Cauley-Stein. Obviously playing with more talented players, with Draymond, with Steph, with D'Angelo Russell versus what he was there in Sacramento, and just not having that same level of playing time, those same opportunities that he had last season with someone like Looney coming in behind him. Now, he's going to consistently be a rotation guy, Cauley-Stein. I have no problem with that. But for a guy that's had that opportunity to be a starting center for multiple seasons, and if memory serves me correctly, I'll have a look at this while I'm talking. I don't think he's ever had a top 100 fantasy season. Now, some of that is because of the poor free throw percentage, and if we punt that category, then he probably would jump up into that top 100 discussion. But for a guy, that is that starting center, 7-foot big man who just doesn't block any shots, and talked up so much, I'm going to get a max contract, I'm going to bump my usage, I'm going to be this guy. He obviously isn't. He can't do it. He is already 26 years of age already, and I was correct. He has never had a top 100 season. His best seasons were his last two, where he was 116th and 118th in 28 and 27 minutes, and getting above that level this season, I think is going to be pretty tough for Cauley-Stein to achieve. Let's look at the Houston Rockets. This one should be... Actually, there's a couple options who it could be here. There's actually multiple ones. I went with Russell Westbrook as a player in a worse situation. It could be Jim Harden. It probably is Jim Harden. It could be Eric Gordon as well, who'll get even less of an opportunity to handle the ball and shoot when Harden and Westbrook are splitting time. It could be someone like Clint Capella, whose rebound numbers go down with Westbrook around. So there are a few options here in Houston, but I've gone with Westbrook. We know what Westbrook did last season. Now, don't confuse what I'm talking about with Westbrook in terms of category leagues versus points leagues. We know the deficiencies in Westbrook, but he was still the 7th ranked player per game in points leagues last year. People they don't understand a lot of the time the big differences that Westbrook has in a category league versus a points league. 16th in category leagues last season, averaging 23, 11, and 10. Now, I don't think he's going to average 11 rebounds. I don't think he's going to average a triple-double. And I don't think he's going to average 11 assists. Could his efficiency go up? Sure, but we've had 10 years of him being inefficient. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. He had that 1 year where he was a good three-point shooter, and after that, he's like Derrick Rose from behind the line, 29% shooting from three last season. Now, the turnovers, I believe, will fall, but to be fair, he only had 4.4 turnovers per game. That's not where it was at 5.5 or 6 at certain times in his career. And he also saw a significant reduction in his usage last season playing alongside Paul George. So he did take those steps. He wasn't this guy that had that 34, 40% usage rate, which we have associated with Westbrook in the past. So he did take that step back. And I don't think there'll be necessarily a massive drop in usage. Yes, Harden takes a lot of usage. He'll drop his usage back. But as I said, with Paul George in Oklahoma City last season, Westbrook took that step back and he had a usage of 30.6%, which is still relatively high, but it's not completely unobtainable in Houston. He could get to that level. He probably won't get quite to 30. And the other thing we also have to remember is what usage means. Usage means the amount of possessions that you end, and you can end a possession three ways. You can take a shot, you can take a free throw, or you can turn the ball over. It has absolutely nothing to do with rebounds. It has nothing to do with assists. It has nothing to do with steals. It has nothing to do with blocks. It has nothing to do with how efficient you are. It maybe indirectly has an impact on how many threes you hit, but not necessarily. So we'll all go, his usage is going to drop. That doesn't mean that he's going to get fewer rebounds or assists or steals or blocks or any of that other stuff. It doesn't actually mean that. Now, you can infer that his rebounds will be fewer, his assists will be fewer, and I think that is the case for Westbrook. But I also don't think that he's going to have this massive, ridiculous drop-off where he becomes like a fourth-round player or anything like that. So some of his numbers I do believe will drop. I think that usage will come down a little bit. The assists and the rebounds will come down. So it's definitely not as good of a situation for Westbrook. But I think we might swing the pendulum a little bit too far in one direction, especially for points leagues, where I think that at the end of the first round, the start of the second round, he's going to be a solid enough selection in those type of formats. And in the right category situation, depending on what you're punting, you can still get that value for Russell Westbrook. The next guy the next team we look at is the LA Clippers, and which player is in a worse situation for them? I think it's Lou Williams, who last season took a bit of a step back. The year before, he'd played like 30 minutes a night and was a surprise top 30 player. Last year, those minutes came all the way down to 26.5. He played, he's 33 years of age. He did average 20 points, but now instead of Danilo Gallinari and Tobias Harris, it's Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So there's going to be staggering between those guys. Williams at that advanced age, maybe he loses a minute or two here in terms of that playing time, and that usage of 34.4, that is almost assuredly going to take some sort of a hit for Williams this season. So is he going to be a standard league guy? I think he probably still is. But I just don't see how Lou Williams, with those new additions, with an extra year of age on him, with maybe holding him back a little bit in terms of getting ready for the playoffs, and having these guys like George and Kawhi who can be that guy who takes a shot, as Williams had been a lot of that guy for the Clippers so much of his career. I'm just not sure he can get back to being the 78th ranked overall player where he was last season. He already was a disappointment in terms of ADP last year, where he went from 59th in ADP down to 78th. I think we could be in a similar situation for Lou. We all still love Lou Williams and we know what he does, but I just think the struggle there for him to be a 20-point per game scorer, and I can see his usage taking a pretty significant hit for this coming season with all those additions and the way that the Clippers are going to be changing up their ideas for this coming season. Let's look at the LA Lakers. There was multiple options I had here. It could have been Anthony Davis, a guy that's taking a hit this season, but the player I'm going for is the future MVP, Kyle Kuzma, a player whose hype definitely exceeds his overall production, never had a top 100 season. Last year, in 33 minutes a night with 25% usage, he still was the 112th ranked player because low rebounds, low assists, no steals, no blocks, and completely inefficient. In his third season, we could see the efficiency rise definitely, but him getting 33 minutes when Anthony Davis, LeBron James, DeMarcus Cousins are all ahead of him in that rotation, and I put Cousins in that mix as well because Kuzma played some center last season, but it also means the fact that Cousins and McGee are there means that Davis is pretty much never playing center, or playing it in a much smaller amount, meaning he takes more of those power forward minutes that then impact where Kuzma can play. You've got Avery Bradley, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Danny Green, who can all push up to the three as well, where Kuzma's going to play. And if Kuzma plays more minutes at the three, it does impact his rebound rate, and it probably impacts his efficiency as well. To me, I'm not sure that Kuzma really is going to be worth a standard league draft pick. We can say that he's young, he's got all this upside, and that's probably true, but actually, maybe it's not true. Actually, I don't even think it is true now that I catch myself on that. Where is that opportunity for him to play those 33 minutes and have that 25% usage? I've got him projected to have a pretty significant drop in playing time and usage this season, and even if that is offset by a change in efficiency, I don't think it's going to be enough to keep his value at a similar level to where it was last season, or to even improve, and I think that's pretty going to be pretty tough for him to do. Make sure you guys are listening to Locked On NFL. The format's changed. New host Brian Peacock, Matt Williamson, former NFL scout, is still around, and he is giving his unique take on the NFL. So make sure, with the NFL season starting up now, preseason underway, Locked On NFL is the national daily podcast that you need to be checking out. Follow Locked On NFL on your favorite podcast provider. Let's go on to the next team that we're looking at here in the Western Conference. It's the Memphis Grizzlies. It wasn't an easy situation with the Grizzlies. A lot of these guys getting larger roles, but someone who I think is going to be pretty squeezed is Kyle Anderson. Now, I was pretty big on Anderson last season. He got dicked around by numerous things. He got dicked around by entering the season with an Achilles injury, exiting the season with a shoulder injury, and getting Bickerstaffed in the middle of the year, just barely playing him. He still played 30 minutes a night and just barely missed cracking the top 100. He was a 54% shooter from the field. His free throws dropped right off. He had those 3 assists and 6 rebounds. So why, Josh, if you think he's going to be healthy this season, do you think he's dropping off? Well, at this stage, Andre Iguodala's on the team. I do not think Iguodala plays a single second for the Grizzlies, but that's not the point. Jay Crowder came across in the Mike Conley trade, who plays the same position. We're going to be getting more minutes from Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark, Jonas Valanciunas in the front court, so limiting those minutes that Kyle Anderson will play in the front court. That's all going to be a relative negative in terms of where he sits for this year. And I think we're going to see fewer minutes from Anderson as that interesting switch piece coming off the bench, maybe behind Crowder, playing the 3 and the 4, but just not getting those 30 minutes a night that he got last season with those players like Jackson ramping up, with the addition of Crowder and the addition of Clark there. It is going to be hard to see Anderson get to that same level of impact, as marginal as it was last season, that he even had in that 18-19 campaign. So he moves into, I believe, quite a smaller role for this Grizzlies team, and that's not going to be great for his fantasy value for this coming season. On the Minnesota Timberwolves, someone like Gorgie Jeng could have been an option. I don't think Gorgie Jeng's going to even be a rotation player, but someone who did flirt with fantasy value for majority of last season was Noah Vonleh. He was the 156th ranked player over the course of the season. He had stretches where he was top 100. Now, of course, he was extremely inconsistent with his playing time. That's not his fault. That's the bloke in the glasses who's making those calls. Shout out to Fizdale. But Vonleh put up some pretty interesting numbers, some career high-ish type numbers, especially with some of his block rate stuff and some of his efficiency. Took big steps forward in that area. But now he heads to a team where Bob Covington's going to be the starting power forward, almost definitely. Karl Anthony Towns is your center. So where is Vonleh fitting in on this in this rotation? He did fall off at the end of last year as well, as the Knicks started reducing his minutes. And we saw some of that form not be able to stick. But I just don't see how he's getting anywhere near those 25 minutes a night on this Timberwolves team, given the way that they can structure things up. We've got a lot of Covington at power forward. There's Keita Bates-Diop there as well, who can also be pretty useful as a player. Yes, Taj Gibson and Dario Saric are both gone, both power forwards, but that doesn't mean that we're getting Vonleh come in and play these big minutes. Maybe he does. Maybe I'm wrong with how I'm viewing that Timberwolves rotation. I just don't see him coming in and being this guy who's playing all these minutes. Jordan Bell, another guy that they signed, who I think they'll look to run alongside Karl Anthony Towns quite a bit. Jake Layman can push up, and they signed him. He can play at the 4 as well. Trevion Graham, he's probably not going to be too much of an impact, but the fact that they drafted Jarrett Culver, pushing Wiggins exclusively up to a 3, Josh Okogie's around, pushing Covington up to a 4 as well, that's going to impact what Vonleh can do for this coming NBA season. Let's look now at the New Orleans Pelicans. I'm going with JJ Redick as a player in a worse spot this season. Redick played quite a bit last season for the Sixers, 31 minutes a night, and he is now 35 years of age. He averaged 18 points in over 3 threes and was the 101st ranked player. Getting to that level this season, I think is going to be pretty tough for Redick. He comes in and most likely he will be coming off the bench. Now, there's some debate as to whether he or Brandon Ingram will start. It doesn't appear to be any debate between Lonzo and Drew there, the backcourt. Ingram or Redick is the decision, apparently. I think it's almost definitely going to be Ingram, and that means that Redick coming off that bench, getting those 31 minutes is tough. Now, you can get 30 minutes off the bench. It's not likely. I think he's more likely to play that Lou Williams role from last season, where he plays 25, 26 minutes a night. There's Josh Hart in the mix there as well. There's Frank Jackson, who had some playing time for the Pelicans in that backcourt also. And Redick is 35 years of age. Now, he's still going to be a pretty strong option as a three-point streamer. I still have confidence in him hitting those threes, but he doesn't do enough in those other areas. Rebounds are low, assists, steals, blocks, not high numbers in any of those categories. And I just don't see where Redick's going to be able to replicate what he did by playing 4 or 5 fewer minutes this season as a member of the Pelicans versus where he was as a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. So I just don't see this being a great situation for JJ Redick moving into this coming season, given the new team. But he's going to be key for this squad. It's just not going to necessarily translate into fantasy basketball. Next up, we look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I'm going with Dennis Schroeder as my player who's in a worse situation. Yes, Russell Westbrook is gone, But Chris Paul is in, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is in. Gilgeous-Alexander is the point guard of the future. Chris Paul is the point guard of now. And on a side note with Paul, I think his per game projections are going to absolutely blow your mind when you see what they look like on Basketball Monster. That's not saying he should be picked anywhere near where they rank because of the injury risk, but his ability now to generate a ton of assists, even if the minutes are fewer than in Houston, is going to be really high. And I think that there's so many shots that need to go around. Paul is going to see that production really ramp up. But now we go Schroeder, who was a guy that was playing a lot of two guard next to Westbrook last season. He moves into the third string point guard role. And also, I think Gilgeous-Alexander starts at shooting guard, but Andre Robertson is back. Now, he'll start at small forward, but Terrence Ferguson, MC Hamidou Diallo, they're all in the mix as well. So what Schroeder did last season, where he played 29 minutes a game, still couldn't crack the top 150. And you think, oh man, Westbrook's gone. This is a great opportunity for Schroeder. It actually makes it worse for him. And I think those 29 minutes a game that he played last season, it's going to be pretty bloody tough for him to replicate those numbers. He was inefficient. The low steal rate, the assists were pretty nice. But now again, third option as a point guard on this squad, it's going to make it hard for him to really get to those same numbers where he was at last season. The next one we look at, the Phoenix Suns, a couple of guys in better positions this season, but Meth Curry, Tyler Johnson, he is going to be the guy who struggles. He came across, they started him at point guard incorrectly, in my opinion. You know my thoughts on what the Suns should do in terms of their point guard spot, but now he comes in behind ravishing Rick Rubio, behind Devin Booker. McCall Bridges might play a little bit of the two as well. So Tyler Johnson comes in. They also had Ty Jerome that they drafted as a point guard. Ali Okobo still there. Do they do anything with Javon Carter? Johnson is an expiring contract, a very large contract. He's at risk of getting traded. He's also just not that good, and I think that's a concern in terms of where he fits. He's not a distributor. He finished last season 167th despite playing 27 minutes a night, and getting to that level of playing time, I think it's going to be a pretty big stretch for Tyler Johnson heading into this season. Not someone that should really be on anyone's radar for 12-team, 10-team, and probably 14-team leagues for fantasy basketball. The opportunity, I just don't think, is going to be there for him for this coming season in Phoenix with the moves that they made with their squad. Also, Cam Johnson, maybe he gets minutes at the two also. You're pushing Johnson further down the pecking order. On the Portland Trailblazers, I've gone with Kent Bazemore here. Now, this is an interesting one for me. Bazemore goes from a bad team to a good team, but he played only 25 minutes a night in Atlanta. He is 30 years of age, but where does he fit in this Portland team? Now, I could be off with Bazemore. Out of all of these ones that I've spoken about so far, I could be wrong here because they do have Damian Lillard at point guard, there's CJ McCollum at shooting guard, and then they lost their starting small forward with Mo Harkless gone. Now, who moves into that spot? Is it Rocket Rodney Hood? Or does Kent Bazemore come in and be that starting small forward for this team? I'm not certain as to how they're going to run that. We also saw a huge drop-off in efficiency from Bazemore, true shooting of just above 50%, which is really poor. He does generate defensive numbers in a good amount, and if he played 30 minutes a night in that starting small forward role, then I think there would be some value in him in a standard league. I don't think he's going to be in that spot. I think it is going to be Hood that starts as small forward. We saw Hood have some pretty big games in the playoffs, but we know that his issues in terms of staying consistent or staying healthy are a problem. So Bazemore, I think, will become more of a streaming type option. But in terms of a consistent top 150 guy, which he was last year amazingly, I don't think he's necessarily going to get to that level on this squad. He goes to a more talented squad, and I'm just not sure the role is. It might be bigger than the 25 minutes he played last season. It also may not be, depending on how Stotts wants to run that rotation. With Hood there to replace Harkless, depending on exactly how they want to do that. Of course, Anthony Simons getting some of those minutes as well in the backcourt will have an impact on Bazemore. The Sacramento Kings, I had a couple of options here. I could have gone with Nemanja Bjelica, who is almost definitely going to lose his starting power forward spot to Marvin Bagley. But the player I'm going for here is Bogdan Bogdanovic. And it pains me to say it. I like Bogdanovic. I think he's really, really good. But with the way the Kings have structured their roster in free agency, he's going to find it hard to get the level of playing time that he got last season. Now, last season, Bogdanovic was a top 120 player and played 28 minutes a night, and that's even with starting the season with a knee injury. He only played 70 games, so missed some of that time, averaged 14, 3.5, and 4. But we have to consider where he fits. Their starting point guard, it's De'Aaron Fox. There's 35 minutes done. Their starting shooting guard, Budrick Hield. There's 32 minutes a night done. And the thing is, well, play Bogdan Bogdanovic at small forward. But they paid way too much money to bring back the pencil Harrison Barnes. Barnesy to be the starting small forward. Then they also brought in Trevor Ariza to come in and be backup small forward and play some power forward as well. There's Bagley, there's Giles, there's Holmes, there's Deadman, there's Bielitsa in that front court still. So where is Bogdanovic going to play? Where is he going to get these 27 minutes a night if Barnes and Ariza are taking nearly all of the small forward minutes and Hield's taking majority of the shooting guard minutes? So finding those 28 minutes a night for Bogdanovic again, I think it's going to be pretty rough for him to get to that level. Now, I would play him over Ariza. I think he's better than Ariza. Do the Kings believe that? I think he's better than Harrison Barnes. Do the Kings believe that? I think they probably don't on both of those counts, and that's probably going to leave him on the outside looking in. Still a player who I definitely want to watch to see where it fits with him, and to see exactly how they use him and keep him on maybe the back end of my roster. Maybe I look at him as a waiver wire target depending on when they wake up and see that he is actually one of their better players. But at this point, with the way the things are currently shaking out in Sacramento, I'm just not so sure he's going to have that same level of opportunity that he had last season. The San Antonio Spurs. I'm looking at Bryn Forbes as a player who is in a worse situation as last year. He played 28 minutes a night, averaged 12 points with 2 threes, shot fantastically, 43% from 3, but now DeJounte Murray comes back. So whose minutes is Murray taking? Is he taking Marco Bellinelli's? Probably. There's Pat Mills. There's Derek White, who's absolutely on the fringes of really breaking out. And this is meaning that DeMar DeRozan doesn't play a single second as a shooting guard. And with Rudy Gay and DeMari Carroll in as small forwards, maybe DeRozan has to do that. So I'm not sure that Forbes is even going to start. Those 28 minutes look like a pretty lofty goal for him to get to. And he was really just an option as a three-point streamer. But his value in those deeper leagues, in those leagues that count three-point percentage where he had significant value, will he be able to maintain that same level, that same volume, that same amount of playing time? I think that all feels like a bit of a stretch for Forbesy, who, despite shooting well and playing well, just the return of someone like DeJounte is going to naturally just push him down the pecking order at least one spot, and depending on how everything else runs. The last team I'm looking at here is the Utah Jazz, and my player in a worse spot for the Jazz, it pains me to say it, of course, is Jingling Joe Ingles. The reports out of Utah are that Ingles is potentially going to move to a bench role. He played 31 minutes a night last season, but Bogdanovic coming across, there's a real chance that Ingles moves to the bench and they start Bogdanovic and Royce O'Neal in those 3 and 4 spots. And that pushes Ingles, who, at age 32, he can come in, he can run the second unit, and he plays maybe 29, 27, 30 minutes. Now, we know how good Ingles has been from a fantasy point of view. Elite shooter, ton of assists, almost 6 assists per game. But this is a team that lost Raul Neto. Dante Exum can't be trusted to run the point. So Ingles can still get his assists. But will the 31 minutes go to 28 minutes? Will that cause a drop-off in some of his other numbers? Weirdly, his free throw percentage took a hit last season. Is that an age factor coming in with Joe? So, he hit an ADP of 59 last year, ended up as the 73rd ranked player. I think there's a realistic chance he's not a top 100 guy, especially if they play him 28 minutes a night versus 31, and that extra year of age-related decline could have an impact on Ingles for this coming season. I like Joe Ingles. I think he's a great bloke, obviously the only NBA player that's been on this podcast before. But I do think that he is probably in a worse spot with how the Jazz are going to structure things with O'Neal and Bogdanovic most likely starting in that front court and Ingles running a lot of the second unit. That'll do it for my worst players, players in a worse spot this season. Western Conference. Yesterday's show was Eastern Conference. On the YouTube video, check out the comments below. I'm going to have all the links to the Red Rock Challenge leagues. All of the head-to-head leagues are filled up. So we've got points leagues and roto leagues. If they fill up, we will end up releasing some more head-to-head leagues, but I've got to fill those roto and points leagues first. So check out the posts for that in the comments below. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball and the Locked On Podcast Network at Locked On NBA Net on both Twitter and Instagram. My Instagram is Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Whisper it in their ears. Write it on a paper plane and send it through their bedroom window, whatever it is. Tell them to go listen to this show, watch it on YouTube, subscribe, like, leave a comment, all those great things. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Josh Okogie.